As I've said before, and I want to make this very clear, I don't hate anybody. I don't. I look for grace wherever I can find it. And when I say my prayers, one of the things I ask my Maker for is, please God, don't let me hate, because sometimes it's hard here in Washington. There have been many a morning when I've gotten up in my overpriced Capitol Hill apartment and I'm walking over here to the Capitol and I give myself a pep talk. I talk to myself. I say, Kennedy, today you're going to follow Jesus. And by 10 o'clock, I still want to follow Jesus, but I also want to slap the hell out of somebody. So it's important that we remind ourselves, don't hate. And I don't hate anyone, and that includes President Biden. But President Biden and his people had the remarkable ability to take something that wasn't broken and try to fix it. They would take something that wasn't broken in government and take it apart, loosen a few screws, and then it would be broken. In a few minutes, I'm going to ask the Senate to vote to try to repair some damage that President Biden's folks did in that regard. It has to do with banks. As you know, Mr. President, the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, I'll call it the OCC, so you'll know what I'm talking about. The OCC regulates our banks. And that includes big banks, but also small banks. We've got more small banks in America than we have big banks. In fact, our smaller banks throughout this wonderful country make most of the loans to ordinary people. A lot of the big banks now, if you're just an average small businesswoman or businessman and you need a loan, you go to the larger banks and they won't even see you. You have to go to a small bank to get that loan. Small banks merge all the time. You've probably seen it in your local communities. Why do small banks merge a lot? Well, one of the reasons is they can provide better services to their customers. Another reason that small banks tend to merge a lot is because maybe they want to move into a new geographical area and they can't do it alone, so they'll merge with another bank in that area. A third reason that small banks merge a lot is because they think, when they discuss their merger, that together they'll be stronger and more profitable and therefore can make more loans. But another reason is to try to comply with federal regulations. I mean, our federal regulations with respect to a bank will take your breath away. There are a bunch of them. And it costs so much to comply with rules and regulations by the federal government. Our rules and regulations now cost the American business person about $2 trillion a year. Now, I'm not saying all those banking regulations are not, but the cost of those regulations gets passed on to consumers, and that's why, in part, products and services have increased in price. But there's so many federal rules and regulations that a small bank will often say, I can't comply with all of this alone. I've got to get help, and we've got to spread the cost. So that bank will merge with another bank, and they'll have more people, and it'll be cheaper through economy of scale. which I know, Mr. President, you understand because you're a very, very successful business person. But they can spread the cost through economy of scale. So small banks merge all the time. Now, we recognize that. The Office of Comptroller of the Currency, OCC, back in 1995 saw this coming. And the OCC at that time said, we want to devise a way for small banks to be able to merge fairly easily, but at the same time, we at the OCC want to be able to make sure that what they're doing in this merger is not a risk to a consumer. So the OCC in 1995 issued what's called the Bank Merger Guidelines of 1995. And their rule for the merger of small banks was pretty simple. The OCC devised this short questionnaire where if you were two small banks and you wanted to merge, you had to answer yes or no to 14 separate questions. Very simple, very straightforward. 14 questions, you answer yes or no. And then the OCC, the folks at OCC, could look at your answers and see if they thought there was any risk to consumers. And the OCC also adopted a rule that said, look, if we don't give you an answer within 15 days, because we're busy, the OCC said, your merger is automatically approved. Short, sweet, very effective. We haven't had problems with our small banks, and none of these mergers, hundreds that have taken place since 1995, which has actually made the financial system in America stronger, created virtually no risk. Well, President Biden's people at the OCC decided that it wasn't broken, so they were going to fix it. And again, I don't hate anybody, but you got to call it like you see it. I think the folks at President Biden's OCC got up one day and thought there was an award for being stupid. They took this very simple, effective rule and procedure, and they turned it on its head. And what they did was tier 1 level moronic. Here's what they did. They threw out the old rule. They said, we're going to have a new rule. And the new rule is instead of these, this was in 2013, instead of these 14 simple yes or no questions, we're going to make all these small banks submit so much paperwork to us that you could stack that paperwork right here and stand on it and practically paint the ceiling. They threw out this simple 14 yes or no questions. They said that now these small banks, these are small banks now, community banks, have to submit reams and reams of evidence. We at the OCC will start making a decision based on 19 criteria. The banks will have to prove that they comply with 13 of what the OCC called positive indicators, and the banks will have to show they do not align with 6 of what the OCC started calling negative indicators. And the procedure, not only did it require reams of evidence, just trying to read their rule that they put out. I mean, it was written in Sanskrit. You know, you'd have to go hire a bucket load of lawyers to be able to just understand the rule. And then President Biden's people said, and not only that, but we're going to throw out this 15-day rule that if you don't hear from us within 15 days, your merger is automatically approved. Well, it threw the merger process for small banks that was working beautifully into total disarray. And And it just made the whole process more expensive, less efficient, and more expensive for consumers because the costs are passed on. So in a few minutes, I'm going to ask the Senate to reject President Biden's cumbersome rule. I'm not going to suggest that we not regulate small bank mergers. I'm going to suggest that we go back to the procedure that we were using since 1995, which worked, and that we go back and adopt that procedure. That doesn't mean that the OCC can't revisit it at some point. But let me just be blunt. What President Biden's OCC people did was put together a plan, a new rule that looks like it was put together by a heroin addict with a socket wrench. I mean, it's the most convoluted thing you've ever seen. And if we vote yes today, and I hope we do, then we will reject his rule and go back to doing it the old way.